Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
I opened the email on a Thursday morning right before pouring myself a second cup of coffee, the one I usually savor while scrolling through the daily avalanche of nonsense and half-hearted promotions in my inbox. Subject line: The Miller Family Year-End Newsletter, 2024 edition. I recognized the sender immediately, my mom, of course, the self-proclaimed editor-in-chief of our family's legacy. For the last 15 years, she's treated this thing like it's the Sunday Times, but with a much more self-satisfied tone and a much worse font choice. I used to look forward to it, if only to see which version of the truth shed spin about each of us that year. I clicked it open with the same kind of low-stakes anticipation you feel when you check a lottery ticket you know damn well isn't a winner. I read through the usual: Ryan's expanding real estate empire, now in 6 states and still growing. Meghan's pottery line, making it into some local boutique in Vermont, and even a blurb about their golden retriever Max, finally learning to sit without bribery. Cute. Predictable. But then, something caught my eye. Or rather, didn't. I kept scrolling, waiting to see a paragraph that started with Lila, or even a casual mention. Meanwhile, Lila's still in Chicago, doing well, or Lila visited in June, it was so nice. But nothing. Not a word. Not even a passive-aggressive jab, which is usually the bare minimum. The newsletter ended with a sign-off from the proud parents of Ryan and Meghan and a little clip-art Santa hat waving goodbye. At first, I thought maybe my section was misplaced or omitted by accident. Maybe Mom was in a rush. Maybe she forgot. So I went back up and read the damn thing again, slowly this time, line by line, like I was looking for a typo in a legal contract. But no, I wasn't in there. Not once. I'd been deleted, quietly and cleanly, like a line item in a spreadsheet that no longer made sense. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a message. And it hit me harder than I care to admit. Because this wasn't some random family update, this was their public narrative. The story they wanted the world to believe about themselves. And in that version, I didn't exist. I sat there at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen like it had insulted me personally, trying to decide if I was hurt or just pissed off. Maybe both. Honestly, probably more pissed. I mean, who gets written out of their own family like a secondary character who didn't test well with focus groups? And let's be clear, I'm not some scandalous embarrassment hiding out in a trailer park or living off crypto scams. I've got a job, an apartment, a cat who only pukes when he's nervous. I've got friends, a career in journalism that pays decently, and I've even had 2 relationships in the past 5 years that didn't completely crash and burn. Not exactly Nobel Prize material, but still newsletter-worthy, if we're being honest. But that's the thing with my family. If you don't fit into the version they're performing, they don't adjust the play, they just cut your lines. I called my mom that afternoon. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What was I going to say? Hey, quick question. Did I die and nobody told me? No thanks. Instead, I forwarded the email to myself, just so I'd always have a copy. A little keepsake. Something to look back on next time I thought about flying home for Thanksgiving and needed a reminder not to. By evening, the anger had set in. Not the red-faced, screaming into a pillow kind. No, this was quieter. Colder. The kind that sits in your chest and whispers that maybe they've always seen you as optional. Maybe this was just the first time they were honest about it. I poured myself a 3rd glass of wine, which, yes, I know is technically too much for a Thursday, but it felt earned, and started scrolling through old family newsletters saved in my Gmail. There I was, back in 2017, mentioned as our adventurer in the city, and in 2020, as still grinding away at her writing, proud of her. Hell, even last year, they wrote about how I adopted a second cat after a breakup, and Mom made some tone-deaf joke about becoming the neighborhood's resident cat lady. But now? Total blackout. So I did what I do best. I opened a blank Google document. And I started writing. Not an email. Not a letter. A headline. Because if they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, fine. I could play that game. But I've got words. I've got a keyboard. And I know where the skeletons are buried and who paid for the shovels. They can leave me out of their little fantasy. But they damn sure won't be left out of mine. I've been invisible for longer than I've been angry about it, which is probably why the rage feels more like dust than fire now. It settles into the cracks of everything, quietly, like something that's always been there. Growing up, I wasn't abused, neglected, or locked in any attic, no horror story there, no tragic violin soundtrack. I was just skipped, left unacknowledged like the salad fork at Thanksgiving or the old voicemail no one bothers deleting. My brother Ryan was the firstborn champion of every sport that involved a ball and a scoreboard, who learned to tie a tie at 10 and was selling chocolate bars for fundraisers like a Wall Street exec in training. My little sister Megan came nearly a decade later, after a miscarriage that Mom wept about in church more than at home, and she was the golden-lit miracle who could do no wrong even when she swallowed a battery or carved her initials into the piano. And then there was me. Lila, the middle accident with crooked teeth and opinions. Born somewhere between the honeymoon and the breakdown, I hovered in a strange limbo, too old to be precious, too young to be important, and always just out of sync with whatever season the family was celebrating. If Ryan was playing varsity, I was getting a B+ in algebra and being told it was sweet that I tried. If Megan got a role in the church nativity, I got to hold the camera and document the moment from the sidelines. It was never overt, never cruel, just consistent and suffocating in its own subtle way. By the time I was 15, I'd mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight. I'd walk into a room, and no one would pause the conversation. I'd talk about something exciting, a story I'd written for the school paper or the time I won a district writing contest, and the response would be a polite, "That's nice, dear," followed by a 30-minute discussion about how Ryan closed on his first duplex or how Megan had learned to make omelets without supervision. My accomplishments were never real. They were cute, fun, or a great little hobby. I could have won a Pulitzer, and they'd have framed it next to Megan's 4th grade certificate for Best Listener. After high school, I left for college out of state, mostly because I couldn't picture surviving another 4 years of family dinners where I was talked over like the decorative centerpiece no one ever watered. I studied journalism because I liked truth, not the polished, curated kind my parents posted on their fridge, but the messy, uncomfortable kind that doesn't care if it ruins brunch. I got a degree, got a job, moved to Chicago, and started living my life on my own terms. I lived alone for nearly 14 years, from age 22 to 28, and during that time, I grew into myself. I paid rent, built a career, had messy breakups, made rent again, and even started writing pieces that got picked up in national outlets. But you know what stuck with my parents more than any of that? The time I forgot to send a birthday card. They brought it up for 3 years straight, like I'd committed a felony instead of forgetting a date in April during a chaotic work week. That was the kind of daughter I was in their story, forgetful, distant, selfish, a little too full of herself. Meanwhile, Ryan cheats on his wife, and Megan, accidentally, maxes out a joint credit card, and both of them still get priority seating at every holiday event. There's a photo from last Christmas, the one I skipped, where Megan is opening a new ceramic kiln and Ryan's kids are posing with homemade gingerbread men. I was mentioned in a caption, though we missed Lila this year, but we know she's busy. That was it. No one called. No one asked what I was doing. Just busy. Like a doctor too overwhelmed to return a text. This year's newsletter praised Megan for finishing her 3rd pottery class, as if she'd summit Everest barefoot. They included 3 photos of her latest collection, bowls that looked like sad helmets and mugs with drippy paint that they called artful chaos. My mother wrote, "Megan's creativity continues to amaze us." Meanwhile, I just published a story that got quoted on NPR and retweeted by 2 sitting senators. But when we spoke last month, and I use the word spoke generously, since it was more like a passive-aggressive weather update, they still referred to me as between jobs. I wanted to scream. Or maybe just laugh. It's hard to tell the difference now. So I did what I always do when the silence starts feeling heavier than the noise. I opened my laptop, cracked my knuckles, and wrote. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say yet, but I knew it wouldn't be subtle. Because if there's one thing I've learned from being the ghost at the table for 30-some years, it's this. Ghosts know where all the bodies are buried. And this time, I wasn't just going to haunt the family story. I was going to rewrite it and sign my name right across the damn front page. It's funny how easy it is to mimic the language of power when you've spent enough time being talked down to by people who think they own it. All those years I spent skimming press kits, PR statements, political spin, it all came rushing back to me the minute I sat down and stared at the blank screen. The cursor blinked like a dare. I didn't hesitate. I typed the headline with more calm than I expected, almost like it was a grocery list or a casual RSVP. Local family known for their perfect image, covered up infidelity, financial fraud, and a secret pregnancy, revealed by missing daughter in explosive statement. It looked ridiculous at first. Dramatic. Tabloid level. But then again, wasn't that exactly what they'd made out of their lives? A performance? A carefully choreographed photo op with seasonal outfits and matching smiles, where truth was airbrushed out and reality was reduced to whatever didn't embarrass them at Bridge Club. I kept writing. My fingers moved fast, powered by caffeine and 20-something years of being sidelined and corrected and silenced with phrases like, "Let's not dwell on that," or "Don't bring that up at dinner." Every time I hit a period, I heard my mother's voice dismissing one of my stories as a bit much, or my father changing the subject when things got too personal. So I made it personal, professionally. The release read like something from a regional newswire, dry, factual, and laced with enough legal hedging to sound legitimate, but just dangerous enough to feel like something someone, somewhere, was going to lose their mind over. I didn't lie, not really. I just reworded the truth with corporate flair. For instance, senior patriarch John Miller allegedly paid off the IRS to avoid an audit in 2003. That one wasn't even a secret, not to me. I was 14 when I heard the hushed argument about some mistake on the tax forms, and Dad's sudden overnight business trip to DC. Mom told me not to worry, just a little grown-up mix-up. Sure, Ryan Miller, real estate broker, is currently under investigation for false home appraisals. Okay, maybe investigation is a strong word, but he was mentioned in a local complaint about inflated numbers in a hot market. And when I say mentioned, I mean I wrote the piece under a pseudonym, after an anonymous tip from someone who just might have been me. Who can say? And the real gem, youngest daughter Megan, 27, reportedly underwent a private termination after a secret affair with her married professor. That little truth bomb had sat in my back pocket for years, after a drunken confession she spilled during a weird Thanksgiving night in 2019, when she was wine-soaked and melancholy, and I was just bored enough to listen. I never judged her hell, I felt for her, but that didn't mean I owed her silence forever. Each line in the press release was crafted with surgical precision. It wasn't rage writing. It was art. A symphony, carefully composed, perfectly timed. By the end of it, I had created a document that looked and read like a scandalous exposé written by someone inside the machine, someone who had access to the dirt and wasn't afraid to air it out with bullet points and bold headers. I printed 50 copies at a 24-hour print shop 2 blocks from my apartment. I told the guy behind the counter it was for a client's PR campaign, and he nodded like he'd seen worse. I chose thick paper, glossy, crisp, the kind that feels expensive just because it resists folding. Presentation matters, after all. If I was going to set a fire, it needed to look like a press conference. I mailed copies to my parents' social circles, the church bulletin board ladies, the golf club committee, Mom's book club, especially them, the ones who always smiled too wide and asked me if I was still writing those little blogs. I even sent a copy to the Herald, the same local paper that once ran a full feature on Ryan for donating $200 to a neighborhood youth program. That particular envelope I accidentally addressed to the editor's home address. How tragic. The next morning, the anxiety hit me before I opened my eyes. That heavy, pulsing throb of, what the hell did I just do, sitting on my chest like a warning. For a few seconds, I considered calling the post office, begging them to intercept the packages, telling them I'd made a huge mistake. But I didn't, because I hadn't. I made coffee. I sat by the window. I watched the city wake up while I waited for my world to explode. At 9:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Caller ID, Mom. I stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before answering. I didn't say hello. I let the silence fill the line. She didn't say anything at first. Just breathed. Slow, shaky. The sound of someone trying very hard not to scream in a house with thin walls. Then finally, she spoke, not with anger, not with confusion, but with that special tone only mothers can summon when they know the situation is spiraling far beyond their control. What the hell have you done, Lila? She whispered. I didn't answer. Not yet. I just sat there, coffee in hand, pulse steady, watching a pigeon land on the railing outside my window like nothing at all had changed, even though everything had. By Friday, the air around me had shifted, not just in that metaphorical way people like to exaggerate, but in a real, weight-heavy, oxygen-tight way, like the molecules themselves had changed their opinion of me overnight. I could feel it when I walked into the corner coffee shop and the barista, who usually asked about my cat, just smiled, tight-lipped, like he wasn't sure if he should say my name aloud. I could feel it when 3 unread messages from my mother sat stacked in my inbox, all subject-lined, call me. Now. And I especially felt it when Ryan's name popped up on my phone with the kind of urgency you usually reserve for when someone dies or gets caught with their pants around their ankles. Spoiler alert, in this case, it was mostly the latter. I answered because I wanted to hear the shake in his voice. And I did. Ryan, the family's polished golden son who once gave a 10-minute toast at his own birthday party, was hissing through clenched teeth like a kettle left too long on the stove. Are you out of your goddamn mind, Lila? He barked before I could even say hello, followed by something about libel and lawsuits and how I'd better have a damn good lawyer lined up. I let him vent. I let him call me every sanitized insult in his vocabulary. And when he finally paused to catch his breath, I simply said, funny. You never cared what I wrote before. Megan was next. Her text came in a full hour later, 4 short lines that carried more venom than a nest of cornered snakes. Zach saw it. His mom showed him. The wedding's off. Are you happy now? And honestly, I wasn't. Not really. Because despite what anyone might think, I hadn't written those things to destroy them. I wrote them because they were true. But sometimes the truth doesn't just cut, it burns, scorches, hollows. And I'd handed it out like party favors. Then came my mother. Oh, my mother. Her voice had moved beyond furious. She was ice cold. In that way, only women who've been performing perfection for decades can be. You've embarrassed this family beyond repair, she said flatly, her tone brittle and precise, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed in the mirror. Do you know how this looks? People are calling me. They're asking questions. And then, without hesitation, she delivered the line that made me pause more than all the others. I told them you've been unwell. That you've been unstable for some time now. That word, unstable, landed in my chest like a shard of glass. Not angry. Not estranged. Not even bitter. Unstable. As if I were a bomb with wires hanging out of me, ticking under a desk somewhere. As if my anger, my grief, my reaction to being erased was a malfunction instead of a response. But I let her say it. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I hung up. Because you don't debate with someone who's already rewriting the version of you they plan to believe. And that's what this was, really, the family scrambling to save their version of events, their paper-thin facade, their curated Christmas card smiles. I thought I could stomach it. I thought I could keep standing in the ashes of this fallout, watching the polite society they'd built crumble under the weight of unspoken truths. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. My phone rang at 10:30 the next morning. This time it wasn't family. It was my boss, Lisa Kramer, managing editor of the Chicago Independent, a woman who rarely called unless someone had screwed up on a headline or a lawsuit was pending. I answered with the same cool voice I'd used with Ryan, with Mom, with the ghosts of my childhood. But Lisa didn't mince words. "Lila," she said, "someone just forwarded us a statement." "A press release? About your family?" My stomach nodded. It was one thing to blow up the family brunch circuit. It was another thing entirely to set fire to my livelihood. Lisa sighed. "We got it from a media contact. Anonymously. You're not in trouble yet. But this is bizarre. Did you write this?" I could have lied. I could have said I had no idea what she was talking about. But the truth sat heavy on my tongue and slid out before I could stop it. "Yes," I said. "I wrote it. All of it." There was a long pause on the other end. Not angry. Not shocked. Just disappointed. "Why?" she finally asked. I didn't know how to explain it in one sentence. I couldn't tell her about the years of polite exclusion, the 1,000 tiny ways I'd been told I didn't matter, the erasure disguised as oversight. So I said, because it was time someone told the truth. Lisa didn't reply right away. And when she did, her voice was careful. "You're a journalist, Lila. Words have weight. You don't get to use them like weapons unless you're ready for the blowback. We'll talk Monday." And just like that, the call ended, and I sat alone, realizing I might have just nuked the one place where my voice had always been taken seriously. For the first time since I hit send on those envelopes, I wondered if I'd gone too far. Not because I regretted the truth, that part still felt righteous, but because the cost of it was beginning to show up in corners I hadn't expected. Like guilt curling under the door. Like doubt. I closed my laptop. I stood up. I paced. And then, just as I was about to throw my phone across the room and delete every draft I'd ever written, a new email landed in my inbox. Subject line. Your story. I think we're related. No name. No signature. Just the first sentence of the message visible in the preview. "I read what you wrote, and I believe you." And suddenly, my heart stopped. Because I knew exactly which part she meant. The one line I hadn't confirmed. The quiet rumor I slipped into that final paragraph, just as a whisper, that Dad might have fathered a child no one knew about, with someone who wasn't my mom, sometime during the years we weren't supposed to ask about. I clicked it open. I started reading. And just like that, the story I thought I was telling took a turn I didn't see coming. Her name was Ava, and she lived just outside Milwaukee, in a small townhouse with chipped siding and wind chimes that didn't match, the kind of place where secrets go to retire. She invited me over on a gray Sunday afternoon that smelled like cold coffee and leaf mold, the kind of Midwest autumn that makes everything feel 10 pounds heavier. I drove up with a stomach full of questions and a folder full of paperwork, unsure if I was walking into a lifetime of answers or just another version of being politely forgotten. When she opened the door, she looked like someone I should have already known, same high cheekbones as Dad, same uneven smile that pulled more on the right side. She didn't hug me. I didn't expect her to. Instead, she just motioned to the couch and said, "Let's get this over with." I respected that. The first thing I noticed once I sat down was the box on the table between us, a cheap little cardboard kit from one of those online DNA sites, still sealed, still daring. We took the tests in silence, following the instructions like two strangers reading the fine print on a bomb. I'd done enough investigative work to know that results would take days, but the knowing had already settled into both of us, deep in the body, like gravity. We didn't need numbers to prove it. Still, when the email came 3 days later, we opened it together on a video call, her face pale and mine flushed with something between horror and relief. 99.9% match. Paternal sibling. Undeniable. She closed the laptop first. I don't want to be in your story, Ava said, voice flat but not unkind. I've lived 36 years without this circus, and I'm not interested in joining it now. She wasn't bitter, just tired. And I understood. Because if you spend enough of your life being forgotten, erased, or avoided, the last thing you want is to become a headline, even a righteous one. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that the story was bigger than either of us, that truth deserved the sunlight, that maybe this was the point of all of it, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded and went home. For the first time in weeks, I didn't open a Google document. I didn't rage type. I didn't dig. I just sat with it, the truth, the blood, the silence. It sat with me, too, like an unwelcome roommate I didn't know how to evict. Then, one night, when sleep wouldn't come and my thoughts felt too loud for the walls to hold, I wrote something else. Not an exposé. Not a press release. Just a letter, a real one, longhand, written on paper that smelled faintly of mothballs and truth. It was about silence. About what it does to a person. How it creeps in through the cracks, fills the spaces between memory and myth, makes you question your own shape in the world. It was about the absence of acknowledgement and the hunger it creates, not for fame, not for attention, but for existence. I didn't name names. I didn't draw lines. I didn't tell the world about Ava. I just wrote about what it feels like to vanish inside your own family and still be expected to smile for the camera. I mailed it to my parents without a return address. No threat, no signature. Just pages. I expected nothing. Maybe I wanted nothing. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't check the mailbox every day after that like I was 12 again, waiting for a birthday card that might finally say, "We're proud of you," instead of, "Don't forget to call Grandma." 3 weeks later, it came. The newsletter. Thicker than usual. Glossy paper. The header now read, "The Miller Family Reflections, Winter Edition." New title. New tone. And there it was. Page 1. My mother's words. A full-page feature titled, "When Your Child Becomes the Author of the Truth." I read every line twice, then a third time out loud. It was softer than I expected. No direct apologies, but enough guilt zone between the lines to stitch together the entire past decade. She called me brilliant. She called me brave. She called me her daughter. It should have felt like victory. It should have lit something inside me, pride, justice, maybe even the beginnings of reconciliation. But it didn't. Because the truth is, they remembered me only after I made them. They included me because they had no other choice. The silence had been convenient, until it wasn't. And now, after all the chaos, the only version of me they were willing to celebrate was the one they couldn't ignore. I stood outside with the newsletter in my hands, the cold wind flipping the pages like an impatient reader. And then I dropped it right into the trash bin by the mailbox, between a Bed Bath and Beyond flyer and a credit card offer. Not in anger. Not in protest. Just because I didn't need it anymore. They remembered me. But only because I forced them to. That's not love. That's PR.